Ukrainian soldiers, for example, on the front lines, of course, everybody's tired. It's been almost 3 years. But nowhere on the front lines you will see defeatist movements or moods, and our soldiers are still determined to continue to achieve our goals. So let's not be defeatist. And if we want to achieve our goals, and when I say our goals, I mean our common goals, because I'm sure that every European country wants Ukraine to achieve just peace, because if it doesn't happen, it will be, we will all continue to live on a ticking time bomb. Our president said it many times, if things don't go well in Ukraine, Europe is next.
Ukraine has been fighting off Russian attacks for nearly 3 years. In that time, the West has been mostly united in saying it supported Ukraine's efforts to push Russia out. That has all changed in a series of moves by Donald Trump and his administration. Donald Trump revealed how he had a lengthy and highly productive phone call with Vladimir Putin, that they had agreed to start negotiations to end the war. Ukraine has always wanted to gain back land Russia took in 2014, but America's Defense Secretary Peter Hegseth said that was unlikely. And when Trump was asked about it later, he agreed, then wobbled a bit.
Well, I think Pete said today that that's unlikely, right? It certainly would seem to be unlikely. They took a lot of land, and they fought for that land, and they lost a lot of soldiers. But it would just seem to me, and I'm not making an opinion on it, but I've read a lot on it, and a lot of people think that that's unlikely. Some of it will come back. I think some of it will come back. Yeah, some of that land will come back.
We're joined by Yuriy Sak, an advisor to the Ukrainian Ministry of Strategic Industries. He's someone we've spoken to often during the course of the war. Yuriy, good morning to you.
Good morning.
We're going to talk about the politics and the economics, I suppose, the military aspects of this, but your own feeling when Trump made this announcement that he spoke to Putin. Ukraine wasn't in the conversation when he had that conversation. It was Trump and Putin, and they're declaring effectively the end of the war is nigh. How did you feel as a human as you heard that, as a Ukrainian?
As a Ukrainian, I feel quietly optimistic, because there is not other nation in the world that wants this war to end more than us Ukrainians. Because every night, and last week no exception, we are the target of massive missile strikes, drone strikes. The situation on the front lines has been difficult throughout these 3 years. So, and we have always said that, this unprovoked large-scale aggression against our country that started in 2022, and this proxy war that has been lasting from 2014, is an affront to world's values. It's an affront to global freedom. It's a battle between tyranny and democracy. So, but we never said that this battle has to go on indefinitely. And at the moment, we are quietly optimistic, because hopefully, beginning from tomorrow, the large part of the speculation around, what's it going to be like, who's going to have to concede what and whatnot, hopefully these speculations will end, and the actual work of the negotiating groups will begin. And this is the signal that we had yesterday, because immediately after our president spoke with President of the United States, Donald Trump, he said very clearly that, they have agreed, they had a productive call. Our president stressed one more time that, we see the only possible end of this negotiation as achieving just peace. There are certain non-negotiable issues for us, such as Ukraine's independence, Ukraine's territorial integrity, and territorial sovereignty. So the working groups will be assembled now, and they will start actually working out these terms of the future possible agreement. Now, everybody understands that, considering that the war still continues, these negotiations will not be easy. They will be extremely difficult, particularly because from the outset, it is clear that there are some seemingly irreconcilable terms on the sides of Ukraine and Russia. But again, I will just repeat, speculations aside, it's a good sign that yesterday these two phone calls took place. And, we will continue to be strong, to be smart about our negotiations. And we have our goals, and we aim to achieve them.
You're putting a brave face on it, Yuriy, which I absolutely understand. But the fact of the matter is, what the US is saying is they are withdrawing from this sphere of influence more or less entirely. They don't want you in NATO. They are not going to provide troops to guarantee Ukrainian sovereignty. Trump doesn't care about Ukrainian land. His call was with Putin, and then he called Zelensky thereafter. The lesson for the Ukraine and for Europe is simply that America is backing out of its role in support and security. That's just a reality that we now all, but particularly Ukrainians, have to live with.
Well, I will have to disagree with that because, I almost feel like we were watching different readouts and reading different reports about the content of yesterday's conversations. Because, and I'll explain why, because both, for example, Pete Hegseth as well as Donald Trump, they said very clearly and openly that it is important to give Ukraine robust security guarantees. Now, they are in the negotiating process, so it's a very grave exaggeration to say that America is pulling out as a country. It's not possible. America has been with Ukraine for, since day one. There was always bilateral support. There were issues, but even now, we see that if Americans say, for example, yesterday that there will be no American troops as part of the security guarantees on the Ukrainian soil, I mean, we've never asked for foreign boots on our soil anyway. But we want these security guarantees. Now, if yesterday it was said that Ukraine's NATO membership is out of the question for now. That's not a surprise to us. Of course, our membership aspirations in North Atlantic Treaty organizations have been very clear. And we, in fact, believe that de facto we are already a member of NATO because we are protecting NATO's eastern border, and we are fighting for the values that give meaning to the life of people both in Europe and as well as in the United States of America. But if the actual membership is out of the question, and we understand why, because, if you look at the NATO actual founding treaty, you will see that, when a country is at war, it cannot join the alliance. So
I understand that. But I'm just reading you the headline in the Times today. Don't rely on us for protection from Putin, US tells NATO allies. A direct quote from Hegseth says, I'm here today to directly and unambiguously express that stark strategic realities prevent the United States of America from being primarily focused on the security of Europe. They are getting out of the European security business, Yuriy. That means that whatever happens between Russia and Europe is a matter between Russia and Europe. It's a question mark of whether NATO itself will survive in a recognizable form. America is not interested in Europe. He's saying that unambiguously, actually uses the phrase unambiguously.
But at the same time, yesterday, they have both reconfirmed that, NATO is still relevant, NATO is still important. There were no signs yesterday that the US is going to pull out from NATO. That's point number one. Point number two, let's just stress one more time that this is just the first day of a very long and complicated negotiating process. So, of course, things are said considering that there will be other things said as we go forward. Now, another important point. Everybody in the US, both Republicans and Democrats, understand very well that standing with Ukraine will continue to be in the national interest of Ukraine. It's just a fact of life. And finally, and I'd like to stress this very important point. Now, there is one party at that negotiating table that will have a voice, and it will most probably be a decisive voice. And this is the Ukrainian people and the Ukrainian army. Now, if Ukrainian soldiers, for example, on the front lines, of course, everybody's tired. It's been almost 3 years. But nowhere on the front lines you will see defeatist movements or moods. Our soldiers are still determined to continue to achieve our goals. So let's not be defeatist. And, if we want to achieve our goals, and when I say our goals, I mean our common goals, because I'm sure that every European country wants Ukraine to achieve just peace, because if it doesn't happen, it will be, we will all continue to live on a ticking time bomb. Our president said it many times, if things don't go well in Ukraine, Europe is next.
Yuriy, President Trump said last week that the US would seek to claw back money it had given to Ukraine in some form. He said, we're asking for security on our money and that Ukraine has agreed to it. Some say that that's access to rare minerals that Ukraine has large supplies of. Is that accurate?
Well, I would like to say, first of all, that the idea to explore the opportunities of utilizing Ukrainian rare earth critical minerals. That's our idea. You know, we know that we are, in fact, very rich country. We have rare earth minerals. Our major resources are people, of course, but we also have, you know, trillions of rare earth minerals. And I would like to stress that for us, at the moment, we're in a survival mode. You know, we have already paid a very high price for our independence, for our ability to be an independent state. So, and of course, we are looking forward as well. We understand that once the hot phase of the hostilities will end, of course, we will need to rebuild our country. And, you know,
does that mean paying back the Americans? That's the question. Does that mean, I understand the point you're making, but does it mean that the Americans have given you an awful lot of money, as have other countries? Is there some sort of deal being made to say you're going to have to pay it back in rare minerals?
If we stick to the facts, the Minister of Finance of the United States of America was here in Kyiv yesterday. He brought with him the first draft of the partnership agreement with regard to critical minerals. Now our team will study this. This is what our president said openly yesterday. We just saw that agreement yesterday, the first draft. And our president was very clear. These are our minerals. We know that we have to rely on them to survive. So, of course, we will consider partnership agreements, you know, investment opportunities. And but this is not about turning Ukraine into some, you know, critical minerals warehouse for the United States.
I understand that point. I understand the point you're making very clear. Yuriy, it's very good to speak to you. These are really fascinating times, critical times for you. So it's really useful to hear your perspective. Indeed. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
That's Yuriy Sak, their advisor to the Ukrainian Ministry of Strategic Industries. Quietly optimistic, as he says. But there is a question I think we all have to ask ourselves, is that he probably has to say that. And he would have said a year ago that they were going to win the war. And he would have said that 2 years ago they're going to win the war. And when you're the country where this is happening, you have to say that you're confident and you're bullish and you believe in your future.
Well, let's read between the lines. We started yesterday's programme saying everything comes down to the economy, and I think it's blindingly obvious that that is also what is part of this conversation, because there is a reason for the Ukrainians not to publicly go after Donald Trump, even though, as you read every single quote directly to them, you know, they don't sound supportive. The Ukrainians now are very focused on tying up that rare earth minerals deal with the US, which is on the table, which has been presented to Ukraine and is now going to be reviewed and looked at. And I expect that when that deal is done, that is the moment when you really see some acceleration here in this process. It's all about who gets what out of this deal. Let's not mistake it. It is a deal. That's how Trump sees it. He wants to know what he can get out of it. That's why he wants to put himself front and center of it. And he wants to know what he can get out of it in terms of both Russia and Ukraine. And it's clear that rare earth minerals is a big part of that.
But then the other flip side, as we're saying, is then he just wants out the business. He just doesn't want to be... The US don't regard... It seems to us the Trump administration do not regard NATO as important. They don't regard that alliance as important. Heather makes the point the 30s are being played out once more. US isolationism, financial contraction in Europe, moral ambivalence in the face of dictatorship. The only option that European powers have is to rapidly expand our military-industrial base and military capability because the US won't supply material. And with Tulsi Gabbard now confirmed as National Intelligence Director, even a reliable intelligence source is now in doubt. Not much to be optimistic about just now. And I think that's a very fair assessment of the situation. We can kid ourselves. And Ben Wallace will be really interesting at 8 o'clock because we've had him on this programme a lot. And when he was in government, it was very much the special relationship is special. We do share intelligence. We do share a common goal, which is peace across the continent of Europe. We believe together in the transatlantic alliance. I just wonder whether he might say, particularly now he's no longer in office, that's not what Trump thinks.
Or are we just seeing the reality of something we've all known for some time now played out publicly? Are we saying the quiet bits out loud? And if we are, then do we need to accept that Europe hasn't spent enough money on defence for quite a long time, and the UK is one of those countries that has long needed to step up, and that is definitely something Ben Wallace has been saying publicly for some time.